What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and as promised, we're gonna have a glorious episode 1 review of The Witcher Blood Origin. This is not something I originally wanted to do, but as I mentioned in my last video, Dragon Slayer Commentaries, who is on our Saturday night panel, has convinced me to watch this show because he knows how much this show is gonna piss me off. So unfortunately, because he's a good friend of mine, I'm going to listen to his requests, and I'm going to do The Witcher Blood Origin, and I hope you guys will come along for the ride. This is something that I want to do in the future on the channel. I want to do more episodic reviews, because I didn't really do that in the last year, and I want to do it next year coming forward. So if you enjoy this kind of content, please consider leaving me not only a subscribe, but leave me a like so that I know you guys enjoy it, and it helps spread out the videos so we can continue growing into 2023. Now, with that being said, obviously, The Witcher Blood Origin has a lot of backlash going on right now. It's one of the worst rated reviewed shows for 2022, I would say by far. It is pretty bad, not only just for the audience, but for the critics as well. Everybody is slamming this show, and for good reason. So we're gonna go into the actual show, and we're gonna break it down little by little. Obviously, I can't play the video because that's copyright, but I could show you still images and kind of go along to what's happening. So let's get into it, guys. So of course we have the beautiful intro of The Witcher Blood Origin, which in my opinion, I feel like Witcher Blood Origin is basically going to just be Netflix's version of a reset, because they desperately need a reset since Henry Cavill is going to be leaving The Witcher as of season 4, I believe. I think season 3 is the last one he's in, and then that's it. So I think what they're going to end up doing with this series is that they are trying to essentially reboot the series and reboot it in a way that doesn't allow them to lose all the progress that they made from season 1 and 2. Granted, season 2 didn't make a lot of progress at all because people really hated it, but that's besides the point. I think that's what they're trying to do, and that's how they're going to explain the reboot of Geralt as Henry Cavill going into Liam. So we'll see exactly what happens. But the episode starts off with Jaskier. He's obviously in some sort of battlefield because being upside down is clearly the most important thing in the world. And then it gets... I will say that I appreciate this scene because it's very bloody. It's very Witcher-esque, very, very gruesome, which I like. So it's great to see that happen on screen. And then he kind of sees a doppelganger of himself, right? So he sees a doppelganger of himself, and he's questioning who the hell this is. And this particular doppelganger of Jaskier, he's essentially saying that he is the perfect version of Jaskier. And it, lo and behold, ends up being some sort of like weird entity that is trying to get him to retell a story about the original Witcher. So he kind of gets transported because on this battlefield, while everything's going crazy, everything stops. Basically, everybody freezes, and he's trying to wonder why the hell has everybody stopped. He can't quite figure it out, but the only thing that's moving is his doppelganger. So that's pretty interesting. But he looks him face to face, and he says that, why do you look like me? And essentially, he asks him to show a different form, so he ends up looking like this person. So he goes from a doppelganger of Jaskier to some random elf woman, and essentially wants to talk about why the original Witcher came to be and have a retelling of the original story about the elves and the conjunction of spheres. So they try to go into that whole backstory, and obviously Jaskier ends up agreeing to do so, and he starts retelling the story by writing it down, as you can see here. And then we get into the actual intro. This shows all the main characters of this main series. Now, the first main character they showcase, of course, because they have to do it. This is Netflix, right? So they're going to do their identity politics. The first character they're going to show is, of course, Ellie. I believe her name is Ellie, however you want to pronounce it. She is the strong, independent woman who needs no man, and she is the diversity checkbox for this particular show. And she is essentially going to be the girl boss. She is going to basically be the whole reason why the entire show exists, I believe. Like I said, I've only watched the first 2 episodes, so as of this review, I've only watched 2 episodes. I didn't watch 3 and 4 yet because honestly, guys, it's really a struggle. This show is pretty terrible. But then you have good old girl boss Ellie, and she is a traveling bard, essentially, and she goes into a tavern of which she starts to sing. And of course, because she is a strong, independent woman who needs no man, there is a toxic masculinity scene going on where there is a bunch of drunk men who are trying to hit on a woman who doesn't want it, right? So this happens all the time. Toxic men who are drunk, who don't know any better, who are hitting on a woman because that's what men do, apparently, according to Netflix. And then you have a barmaid who tries to stop them from doing so because, that's what this is. And then in the middle of that, all of a sudden, girl boss comes up, stops playing her music, and takes on, granted, she's like 100 pounds, takes on a bunch of 250 to 300 pound men, 4 or 5, 6 of them, who knows, I lost count. at the end of it all. But it's typical scenes that you would expect from a Netflix show. Look at this skinny ass. I mean, listen, I'm not even gonna go into it. So she goes, after she does her girl boss moment, she needs to obviously show that she didn't break a sweat, and it was the easiest thing in the world for her to do. So she goes back to singing, no problem whatsoever. There's not even a single breath lost on these dudes who she just beat up with her knives. And then she ends up finishing the scene, and they end up coming back to the Empire. So now they showcase the Empire, where they show the brother-sister relationship between the Emperor of one kingdom and the actual sister, who is Princess Merwin, who ends up getting screwed, essentially, by this guy who is supposed to be the royal protector, this good old gentleman right here. This is the king right here. This is the sister. This is the guy who ends up screwing the sister and ends up getting exiled because he decided to do so. And they even say beforehand that, hey, we probably shouldn't do this because we're going to get exiled, and or at least he's going to get exiled. And she says, I don't care. I do what I want because I'm a strong, independent woman, and I need no man. So she essentially doesn't want to get into a pre-marriage, but we're going to get further into that story. And they end up obviously doing the deed. They get caught doing the deed by, I believe, his father, and he gets exiled. So his father brings him to the edge of the actual city, and then once he brings him to the edge, he says that you have essentially no place here. You have completely insulted the family name, and that you must never return. So he never returns, essentially. So he leaves, he cries, whatever, sob story. And then the brother, who is the emperor, I believe he never finds out. I don't think he actually ever finds out about the interaction between his sister and the guardsman, but I digress. So they go into this whole story about wanting some sort of peace treaty. He wants to have a peace treaty between the three elven kingdoms, and she does not want that. Nobody seems to want that, but he says that's the only way that things can continue forward. So they end up going to this other scene where they introduce the third main character, who I can't honestly pronounce her name. It starts with an N, Neum. I have no idea. So they end up going there, and then they showcase the pillars. So once you actually get to the monoliths, you see the mage of the story. Now, the mage of the story, I have a big problem with. So let's kind of go into this whole portion about the mage of the story. The mage is a little bit of a cuck mage, right? So he has this inferiority complex because he considers himself to be lowborn. That's what he's calling himself, right? So he doesn't really have the power necessary to rule the empire, but he's still trying to pull the strings necessary to make things happen because he is an advisor to the king, right? So he's pulling the strings, and he's meeting in the monoliths. He's meeting in another world with some otherworldly figure, some blue light figure. This is how they show the figure. You don't really know who it is. It's never really named, at least not yet in the first two episodes. But he is talking to this figure, and he's trying to gain power that's going to allow him to be respected amongst all elves. And right now, he doesn't have that power, but he does say he's willing to sacrifice anything for it. So we go back to Girl Boss here in the tavern, where she ends up getting arrested and thrown in jail because she beat up those 5-6 dudes in the bar. And when she gets thrown in jail, she ends up meeting Dude Boss, right? Who is really just not really a boss. He kind of gets abused by every woman in the entire series, and he's made to look like a joke, but that's what you would expect from a Netflix show. This is the super axe-wielding Dude Boss who was in that trailer breakdown that I gave in the last video that I made about Witcher Blood Origin that went pretty viral, so thanks again for that. But they meet up and they talk nonsense, and they talk about how they're part of their clans, but they're not part of the clans anymore. And then they move on and they go into this whole scene where he comes to find out that he's being let go. After he realizes he's being let go, she decides to attack him, and he thinks it's for no reason other than jealousy, and she actually ends up stealing the necklace that's around his neck that's going to allow her to break free from this cell. So then we go into the king's whole thing where you see Eridan, and they're talking about the fact that they don't want to have a peace treaty because it doesn't really make sense, and the king ends up wanting to have a peace treaty because he feels like that's the best thing for the kingdom moving forward, and they need to make an alliance out of all three elven kingdoms in order to stand united, kind of a thing. So he was looking for peace, and everybody else is essentially looking for dominance. Then we go into a scene where he's trying to get into a brothel. And then, of course, he realizes that his necklace is stolen by good old Girl Boss that can do no wrong. She ends up breaking out of jail, doing her I'm a tough girl boss walk that they always need to look manly, and ends up seeing her sister come back from the kingdom that she came from. Now, when she meets her sister, the sister begs her to come back home because they're trying to have a peace treaty, and she ends up wanting to deny it at first. She ends up letting her sister leave, and then the girl that she saved ends up having a seizure and having a vision about this particular woman, Ellie, and essentially tells her that she needs to find solace in returning to her clan, where she will get redemption if she does. So taking her vision seriously, after talking to, I'm assuming this was her mother, I really don't remember because honestly I was kind of blanking out at this point, but talking to her mother says that the visions are 100% real and they've always come true. So she decides to catch up with her sister and say that she's going to return back home and go on the journey with her. After agreeing to go back home, all of a sudden, she just gets impaled by a freaking arrow, and I see some of the worst acting I think I've ever seen ever. So as she's getting surrounded by what seems to be murderers, or I should say assassins from all three kingdoms, which seems to be odd, obviously, she ends up doing her girl boss moment and takes them all on. But of course, she has to end up getting help from the big dude because they can't just make her, you know, kill a whole bunch of assassins, which honestly, I'm a little surprised that they didn't let her kill all the assassins. I thought that that was going to be a thing that they were going to do because obviously she's a girl boss and she could do whatever she wants. And she did end up beating up most of them, and they did it in terrible fashion. But big dude over here with an axe. And you know what's funny? He's swinging this axe, and they make it a purpose to show you and let you hear how heavy this axe is that he's supposedly swinging, right? It's super heavy. He ends up throwing it, and you can see the force it takes for him to throw that axe. But then I'm going to come back to that point later on in this video. So then, after that whole little nonsense that happens, they end up getting up. She just cried for like literally 30 seconds and got over the death of her sister and ends up going back and talking to him and talking about making an alliance where they don't really trust each other, but they kind of have no choice right now. And they end up going about their merry way on a little journey to try to make revenge happen. Then when you go back to the Emperor, and you see the princess, and she is not happy, and she wants to kind of stage a coup, essentially. And she ends up doing so in some interesting ways. So when you get to the peace treaty, this is the big thing. So this is the big little reveal that they thought they were going to do. Oh, one thing I didn't mention. God, I don't know how I even forgot this. Back when Mr. Mage here, this CGI is terrible, okay? I can't even, like, get a... Okay, this CGI, I can't show you in motion. I can't. But you see how muddied this looks in the background? Just overall, this... When he is standing in this other world, it is god-awful, terrible. The CGI in this show is, like, from 1990. I'm telling you, it is so bad. I was literally, like, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Anyway, let's go back into it because we're going to talk about the CGI again. So here we go back to the big point of the show, right? So we end up getting to the peace treaty where all three kingdoms end up coming together. Then the Empress ends up seemingly getting sick where she needs to walk away. But then you start to notice that it's not just her walking away. It's a major leader from each clan that's walking away as well. So you start to wonder why that is. Why is Eridan walking away? Why is the princess walking away? Why is the other person from the other clan walking away? I forgot who even is the one who leaves. Oh, it's somewhere over here. But they're all walking away, and then the rest of the people are staying for the treaty. But something obviously seems to be up, and then out of nowhere, she cuts the throat of the person who was, I guess, a guard inside of the actual, behind the doors. She cuts the person. This woman over here is totally freaking out. And then, all of a sudden, a super monster with the worst, once again, the worst CGI I have ever seen. This thing is so bad. So bad. For those of you who are still with me, I appreciate you. Don't forget to give me a like. I greatly appreciate it. This fucking monster is terrible. This is the worst monster I've ever seen. The CGI is god-awful. I don't know how they even allowed this to come out into production. How much did they spend on this? That's my biggest gripe. Like, how much did they really spend on the CGI for this show? Because this monster showcases just how bad the CGI actually is. It is terrible. So they continue anyway, and what ends up happening is all the people who were left for the peace treaty completely get wiped out, and the courtyard is completely empty, and literally all three kingdoms and all leaders within the three kingdoms and all hierarchies within the three kingdoms end up getting erased, and all that leaves is the sole empress to take over all three kingdoms as she expected, and they basically staged a coup between her, Eridan, and the mage. So it's a big thing. Balor the mage, essentially, it's kind of like pulling the strings, like I said earlier, but he just didn't, he just doesn't think he has the power. So she essentially goes out, she meets her subordinate, she becomes a new empress, all that good stuff. And to kind of rush through the rest of this, they end up going on a hunt for these two because these two are the last official members who have any sort of pull within those two clans, so they can basically stage some sort of a coup themselves and take over the throne because they still have royal power. That's how I understood it anyway within the first 2 episodes. So they end up hunting after them. Balor ends up talking to Eridan, this whole fucking nonsense. And then the famous good old fight scene from that trailer that I revealed before. And as you keep going, we have another scene where Balor ends up saying that he was successful, and you see more absolute terrible CGI. Seriously. I mean, you could just see the green screen. It is so bad. I wish I could show you the actual live clip, but I can't because it would get copyright to all hell, and I really don't want to deal with that. So then they end up meeting another person who's part of a previous clan, and she ends up they try to convince her to come along and help them for the ride, but she's not totally convinced that they're actually capable of doing so. So she ends up testing them, and that's where that whole terrible fight scene comes into play. So let's bring up the axe again. So the axe, they made it a purpose to try to make this axe seem very heavy, very difficult to swing, very powerful, but literally, she's picking it up with one hand, and oh my god, she's picking it up with one hand, and she has absolutely no issue swinging it. She twirls it. She twirls it like Galadriel did with her sword because they need to show that this woman is super powerful and so amazing. So she twirls like the weapon, the axe that you just spent literally a 5-minute battle scene previously trying to make us believe that it's super heavy, super powerful, difficult to swing. Even when he's fighting her, he's having a struggle swinging this axe, and she just picks it up like it's nothing. It's like, here, take it, after I took it away from you. It's one of those things where it's like, it's so obvious girl boss. It really is annoying. Really, really is annoying because they try to sell you on certain things and then they completely take it away later down the line. So, Witcher Blood Origin Episode 1, that's the breakdown for this particular episode. If you guys enjoyed this style of video, let me know in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it. If you have any tips to try to make it better for you to watch, I would like to listen. So let me know in the comments and let me know what you thought of Witcher Episode 1. I think it was terrible. Honestly, I'm watching this show, and while it has some gruesome moments that I thoroughly enjoy, the rest of it's like, what are you doing? And then the CGI is just so terrible. I cannot wrap my mind around how bad that monster looked, how bad the other world looked with the mage, how bad the other effects were. The costumes are terrible. They're very lazy. I don't know, man. This show is not doing Witcher any justice, and it's not supposed to, because this show, in my opinion, is just strictly being used to reboot the series in a way that doesn't let them lose their progress and also allows them to get rid of Henry Cavill. So let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.